If you thought MotoGP's 2025 Aragon Grand Prix was dull, then personally, I'm not going to disagree with you. Neither is Simon Patterson, and Vel Harunci will only disagree because he exists on a kind of higher intellectual plane than all of us. But we'll get onto that later.
I'm fairly sure that Val's standard response is, but the sprint was good, because that's all he said for the past 24 hours.
There's a slot for this conversation a bit later. This is the Race MotoGP podcast. It's Sunday night when we're recording after a Marquez walkover of an Aragon weekend. But although it wasn't the most hard fought for first place, quite a few significant things happened during this weekend. So we have got quite a lot to chat about. Pecco Bagnaia went from having an absolutely abysmal sprint in which he went from 4th to 12th on merit, just all over the place with errors, no pace, nothing, to finishing kind of competitively in 3rd in the Grand Prix. Now, Simon, before we get into this, I'm going to do a kind of headline caveat. We're not saying Bagnaia is now going toe-to-toe with Marquez, title fight is on, that kind of thing. That's clearly not the case. But in terms of a contrast from quite how awful Saturday was, and quite how awful a lot of races have been lately, to at least being back up with Alex Marquez, this was progress, wasn't it? But it was slightly mysterious progress because, as Matthew Barlow puts it, please can Simon do some digging to find out what has changed on Pecco's bike? It seemed like a huge step forward. And JT, JD, and Stuart Edwards and many others in the Race Members Club on Patreon all asked similar things. So, Simon, we've sent you running around the paddock quite a lot during the Aragon afternoon, working out exactly what was different on Pecco's bike, because Davide Tardozzi from Ducati was dropping some hints, but it's a weird small change that seems to have had this effect.
We did the standard thing of slightly ambushing other riders by confidently pretending that we knew what Pecco had changed until one of them said, yes, that's right, and elaborated on it in more detail, which works surprisingly often in MotoGP. And I'm not going to say who it was that revealed, I don't reveal sources. It was DJ. He said it in his debrief. We can say it. Admitted that Pecco went from using the 340 mil standard Brembo front brake discs to using the 355s, which are bigger and are heavier. And then Pecco kind of admitted that there had been a brake disc change, and Pecco's admission that there'd been a brake disc change kind of fitted with Tardozzi's explanation of, we won't tell you what we changed, but we changed something on the front of the bike. And honestly, listening to... So it's one of those weird things where we worked out what Pecco had changed, but by the time we'd worked out what Pecco had changed, it was after the press conference. And also, press conferences are not very good for like this sort of day, because you get kind of canned answers delivered from on stage with a microphone. Whereas whenever you really want to find something like this out, you do it in a media scrum, you do it in a debrief, because it's a lot more informal and a lot more easily. Thankfully, because there's a Monday test tomorrow, we will be able to do that tomorrow. But we then went and spoke to some of the others, including DJ, including a few of the others, including some of the test riders, which is really good because test riders are sensitive creatures. And they basically, it all fitted together that as ludicrous as it sounds, this actually makes complete sense, that maybe he has figured it out now. And I mean, this is me, who is not an engineer, very loosely, like a lot, kind of putting 2 and 2 together and coming up with 63. We found out in Silverstone that the big change, the kind of big fundamental change between the GP24 and the GP25 was that the new, better, faster ride height device is quite a bit lighter, 650 grams lighter. And because of where it's mounted, it's the controller that's lighter, which is the bit that's in below basically inside the nose of the bike. And a few people had speculated maybe that's why Pecco's having all these front feeling problems, because suddenly the front of the bike is lighter, the balance is different. And after some digging on the Brembo website, which took quite a bit of work this evening, it turns out that the difference between the 340 mil discs and the 355 mil discs is about 400 grams.
Okay. So
and I think they've suddenly
back.
Accidentally found a way to put all the weight back. It's actually probably roughly equivalent because it's on the wheel as opposed to on the bike.
Yeah.
So it's going to feel heavier. So I think maybe they've basically found the way to put the balance of the bike back to the way he wanted it last year. And I mean, go back to pre-season testing, the first day of pre-season testing in Barcelona in November. And pick the circuits where Pecco Bagnaia was going to win and pick the circuits where he was going to finish second or third behind Marquez's. And this would have been a second or third behind the Marquez's circuit. So actually, this is exactly where you'd expect him to be at this point in the season. So I'm not saying that the title race is back on and everything's hunky-dory, but this is the result we should have kind of expected from him today. And he delivered it. So maybe the title fight is back on. We'll find out in Mugello. I mean, we're going to the perfect place to find out.
Yeah, the timing is certainly good for Pecco in that regard, with a circuit at which being demolished by Mark would not feel good at all in 2 weeks' time at Mugello. Val, how much do you buy this? Do you think it's that transformative a change? Or, we're only judging it on one race of evidence at the moment.
Look, I don't know that I buy it, honestly. Like, I buy that it's probably made some sort of change, but it's more like I don't buy the significance or the relief, and I think the whole reaction of the Ducati team after the fact, and I think you could also hear that maybe Pecco is aware of this too, is like, so what? He's back to Thailand opener level. Cool. Yeah. Mission accomplished? ? I feel like I'm doing the same thing as I did in the past with the Yamaha progress, etc. I think we are supposed.
This is the least surprising skepticism in the world. Let's be honest.
Maybe he's, because I did watch the onboard for a sprint race, and that was like really bad. Like, he could barely keep it on the racing line. It was really unconvincing. But we also have to remember that it's not the first time that we've seen Pecco have a transformation from a very so-so sprint to a good Sunday race on a different rear tire with a different fuel tank. It admittedly, usually, at least in the sprint, he's able to ride defensively, whereas this time he was just horrifying, basically unable to perform at all. So maybe there's a small step change, but I certainly, like, maybe his season is back on track, but back on track to what exactly? He's now...
Alex Marquez and finished second.
And which
is what his season was before the season started.
He's still in
teammate's Marquez.
So the problem is he's still even in a 60-point hole relative to that.
Yes.
Which I think is actually because of how well Alex's performances are holding up, because of how, Alex obviously is benefiting from a much bigger bike this season. And usually when a rider improves while getting a bigger bike, a better bike, I'm always very skeptical. I'm like, well, that's just people just like to ascribe personal improvement, because obviously when somebody's on a better bike, he has to be better too, right? Obviously, that's the logic. That makes things easier. But in Alex's case, legitimately, the race pace is holding up so well. The mistakes are not being made. Maybe it's the freedom of the GP24. It's, high performance ceiling. He doesn't have to push himself as hard. But he was very, very, very good this weekend. And even like in the Sunday, when Bagnaia finally seemed to do his usual sort of Sunday normalizing pace thing, I think a lot of us will have felt around lap 10 that, there's a good chance Pecco will finish second here.
Yeah, definitely.
And Alex didn't let him lay a glove on him, didn't let him even come close. And I just can't imagine that happening last year. Even if they were both on the same spec of bike, I would be very surprised, even though Aragon is a good Alex track.
I was about to say Alex was ahead of him for most of the race last year at this circuit until he was spectacularly alongside him and inside him.
And over,
over the top of him. Yeah.
Yeah. Fair point. Right. Yeah. I get the Alex thing. Oh, it's interesting. Davide Tardozzi in his TNT interview he quoted the kind of points gaps that Pecco's recovered from before, famously in his title bids, and the interviewer put to him that actually that wasn't against Marquez, though, was it? And Tardozzi's reply was basically, okay, well, step one, let's catch Alex first. And like you say, Val, that is still a big gap. That does bring us, while we're speaking of kind of regional TV coverage, that does bring us on to another question from the Members Club. Angelina said, Service TV spends quite some time talking about how they think Ducati is not being fair to Pecco with how much they celebrate Mark and how quickly they focused on him. What do you guys think about that? Is there some favoritism at Ducati? I mean, before you two come in, I feel if anything, I don't know what Service TV, obviously I haven't watched Service TV, so I don't know what their vibe is. But it feels like Ducati is being really good at kind of making excuses for Pecco and trying to make it seem like he's still going to have a chance of winning stuff. Sure. I don't feel like they've turned on him by any means.
No, I agree completely. They're still very much on side. I think you can see that from basically everything that they do. From Tardozzi to, even Domenicali when he comes, that they are still Team Pecco. And yeah, it's funny that Pecco, there's been all this weird rumor that I think has basically been started by AI generated Facebook pages trying to get clicks about Pecco going to ride Yamaha next season. And someone put the question to him this weekend, and he was like, no, I'm currently trying to negotiate a contract for 27 and 28, and we both want to sign it. That's not really the vibe of someone who's lost faith in the team and vice versa, is it? Like, Pecco is Ducati for the long time, and they know that, and they kind of push that back the other way, I think.
Tardozzi's interview, I think, indicated that Pecco is being handled with kid gloves a little bit, and he's earned it. He ended Ducati's championship drought. He is the two-time champion. He's done a lot for the manufacturer. He deserves a bit of a leash, but there is more consternation over his relative drop-off of performance than there would have been for your typical number 2 rider. Like if you put Enea Bastianini on that bike instead of Pecco and he's performing like this, it's not a topic. Doesn't come up at all in any post-race. There's never a gloomy face from Ducati, never a quote like, oh, this can't continue like this with Pecco. We can't do it with Pecco this way. Honestly, his performance has not been like, he had this dip in recent rounds that he's recovered from today. But again, this is why I'm sort of pushing back a little against the narrative of, salvage season, saved season. I guess he's more back to the level of Ducati's number 2, but that's not what he wants to be. I don't think so.
I feel like Ducati would strongly oppose the suggestion that Pecco is number 2 as opposed to joint number 1. I think that is genuinely, I think that is still the way they see him as well. No. That's my point. It's not just relative performance levels. I know they signed Marc Marquez, but this is not signing Danny Pedrosa to sit on the other side of the box and occasionally win a race when Marc falls off. This is, sorry, Danny, this is a slight, this is their double world champion, like Val says. This is the guy that ended the drought. This is the guy that brought them back to the top and then did it again the following year and proudly wore a number 1 plate on their bike and et cetera, et cetera. And if anything, his position has been strengthened, not weakened, by the fact that the next guy that won a title then immediately defected and rage quit to go to Aprilia, where he's also immediately defected and rage quit. But anyway.
Yeah, also, on the number 2 topic, though, you don't have to go contractually, you are number 2 when you're 0.3 of a second slower and 2 places behind, running behind your number 1's little brother. So it's kind of taking the situation, kind of taking care of itself for Ducati.
To know where he sits.
Yeah.
There's no ego with Pecco, as much as every champion has an ego, but there's no real ego with him where he knows where his position is right now.
Yeah.
I think maybe that's a part of it as well. He doesn't need Ducati to hold his hand and tell him how wonderful he is because he knows that he's underperforming.
I want to make it clear. This is like whatever I'm pushing back against. It's not like there's any sort of Pecco delusion that I feel or anything like that. And it's not like he shouldn't feel good about the podium after the 2 crummy rounds and the crummy sprint that he had, even though, again, a lot of that was so circumstantial. The Le Mans crash, very circumstantial. The Silverstone, the tire stuff was just so weird in that race. I think his dip was also, there's a lot of circumstance going around it. But I think Pecco repeatedly in the press conference and in all the media appearances was like, you know what, I'm relieved today, but Marc's kicking my butt. I know it. You don't have to tell me that. I know it. I see it right now all the time. I think the Alex fight, I don't think he feels is totally fair when you hear him talk about it. I think he's still quite convinced that on the GP24, he would have been, he would have had that guy's number still. But there's no delusion coming out from him that somehow he's being cut a raw deal by Ducati. There's right now there is acceptance. There's a gulf to Marc, who is making a compromised, he feels, 2025 Ducati work to its absolute peak, and that's what that guy does. So I need to find a way to lay a glove on him, probably at this point in 2026.
Just speaking of 24 Ducatis versus 25 Ducatis, Alex kind of intimated to some Spanish colleagues on Sunday afternoon at the end of the race that there's new parts coming tomorrow at the
him
test.
or for the 25s?
For him. No, for the 24. Which will obviously improve his level.
Will it?
Yeah.
Sure.
Complicate it.
But the other thing that it does, well, yeah, it's a giant lead weight around his neck. But the other thing that it's worth noting is that there is, because the 24 is still homologated by Ducati, that bike's homologated for next year. So even though we're in a 2-year engine freeze, the factory can go back to the 24 next year. So that kind of, it makes sense to maybe keep taking over the development on it, because if Pecco does want to go back, and I think they don't have to homologate the same bike for both riders in the box. So if Pecco wants a 24 next year and Mark wants a 25, they can do that.
And they could also then
potentially
they could also then potentially shift basically everybody to that spec, I presume, or in some capacity, because right now there's 3 25s, 3 24s, but you could just have,
and they could make, and because there's an engine freeze for next season, they could make that decision tomorrow and start building parts so that there's no shortage of those engines next year. They can, they've got a huge lead time to do that this year, which they've never really had before.
No,
so it bodes better for next year for everyone who's not Mark.
Yeah, well, they still have the handicap of not being Mark.
Who's not Mark.
Yeah.
That is a bit of a hindrance.
It's not ideal, is it?
But it could be worse. You could be not Mark on a Honda, as opposed to not Mark on a Ducati.
Or you could be Mark on a Honda. Also not great.
Yeah, that didn't go well in the end either. Yeah. There is quite a lot planned Ducati-wise for the test tomorrow. There's been hints of a new aero package or an old new one, maybe, turning up for the 24.9.
They're kind of due an aero upgrade. We normally get one. The kind of Magello-y time of the year, they normally bring one and homologate that and kind of delete one of the old specs. So it's about time. It's a bit weird because normally this test is in Barcelona. So I keep thinking of this like, oh, this is weird. We have a test at Aragon. But no, we normally have a test at Barcelona about this time where they do bring stuff like that. So kind of on track.
And there was a pretty different one in the preseason. Quite like noticeably different. And I don't know if what they might bring, whatever they might bring, will try to at least reintroduce that.
We will find out at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning local time.
That is true. Shouldn't date this podcast too much.
Well, indeed. I was going to say, by the time you watch or listen to this podcast, that aero may well be on track on Monday morning. So we'll give you plenty of info about it on the race website. And if it's really exciting, I'll force Simon to do a Patreon video talking through what happened at the test as well. If it's really, really, really exciting, we'll have to do an emergency podcast. But let's chill for now, see what happens. Today's episode is sponsored by Insta360, a leader in 360-degree action camera technology and a partner of World Championship leader and Aragon winner Marc Marquez. They recently launched their X5 camera, a new 360-degree camera which shoots in all directions at once in incredible 8K, 30 frames per second resolution for epic motorcycling shots without even having to worry about where the camera is pointing. Just hit record, focus on your ride, find the best angles in the edit with Insta360's mobile app. It's easy, smooth, and uses AI to help you create everything, from shots looking back at you and your friends to racing-style gyroscope action that captures the flow of your rides. See more of your handlebars with an immersive point of view or shoot unique third-person shots of you, your bike, and your riding buddies. X5 is every camera you'll need in one, whether you're an everyday rider or a 6-time MotoGP champion like Marc Marquez. From morning commutes to night rides to the city and everything in between, X5's huge sensors, triple AI chip, and dedicated low-light shooting mode deliver unmatched detail and image quality around the clock. It's waterproof, reliable, and features Insta360's toughest ever lenses and lens guards, both of which are completely replaceable, meaning you can be confident of taking it off-road as well as on and ride in any weather the road can throw at you. Combined with Insta360's extensive selection of accessories, you can mount your camera anywhere on your bike to get just the right shot. And with a built-in wind guard, noise-cancelling algorithms, and compatibility with common Bluetooth communication systems from Senna, Cardo, and others, your videos will have crisp, clear audio and the ability to record your own commentary as you ride. To bag a free lens replacement kit worth £29.99 with your Insta360 X5 purchase, head to the link in the description below and use promo code THERACE. Available for the first 30 purchases only. And for more information, be sure to check the link in the episode description. Simon, you did quite a lot of playing with this camera on the Isle of Man recently, didn't you? And had a lot of fun.
I was just about to throw in that you don't have to be a 6-time MotoGP champion. You can also be a double Isle of Man TT podium finisher, like our friend Dom Herbertson, who took me for a lap, and just, it's awesome. We plugged the camera in a bike, we plugged in a headset to his helmet, a headset into my helmet, and we chatted for an hour as we rode around the TT, and it was amazing.
So
and our guys did some technical wizardry, and it all looks fantastic.
Yeah, producer Rob,
I say technical wizardry, it's not that complicated to do.
It's pretty whizzy. I'll get producer Rob will pop a little link that will pop up on screen right now to that video of Dom and Simon riding around the Isle of Man. It's unlike anything we've ever published on any part of the race before, and it's amazing. It's if you plan to ever contest the Isle of Man TT, the tips you'll get for racing lines and braking points and riding style from Dom are fantastic. It gives away a lot of secrets, but it really, the anecdotes you two share bring the
and if you just like listening
so
to
much.
Dumb Geordie's cracking jokes as well, like it's also great for that. My favorite, no, genuinely, my favorite bits of it is there's a few places where Dom just forgets to talk for like 3 quarters and just giggles as he rides through them. And it's like genuine. It's lovely to see someone that has so much enthusiasm for going to work every day, because that's essentially what it is a TT racer. You know, it's great.
Totally. One of my favorite bits is actually at the end when you two just like get back to the start line and they're just kind of chatting. And he's raced at the TT plenty of times. You've been to a lot of TTs. You grew up in road racing. All of this is like every day for you two. But the enthusiasm is just so lovely to hear. It's glorious. Please go and watch it if you haven't. Even if you're not a TT fan or you don't get it at all, it's a little bit. It's nearly an hour. It's an hour of magic on our MotoGP YouTube channel. While Pecco Bagnaia was doing a mid-weekend turnaround from terrible to okay-ish, the heroes of Silverstone and even Le Mans as well were having a terrible tumble from, well, heroic to really quite miserable. Yamaha has had such a good run recently, but wow, painful Aragon for Yamaha and Fabio Quartararo. As Alex Bradbury Hall in the Race Members Club on Patreon put it, what in the world happened to Yamaha today? All the riders struggling all weekend, and today was even worse. Even KTM was looking a lot better until half of them crashed out. More on KTM later. Val or Simon, who wants to go with this one? Why was Yamaha terrible this weekend after looking so amazing for a few weeks?
Because the Yamaha's not very good at Aragon and never really has been since like the Lorenzo days. And then to make things worse, the one Yamaha that always saves the day is Fabio Quartararo, who absolutely hates the place for whatever reason, just hates it and just didn't really turn up this weekend. I mean, was like punching the fuel tank and screaming at the bike during like moments during FP1, and it just didn't really improve from there. And there was like, he's not a crasher at all. But there was almost a sense of inevitability about him just tucking the front and chucking it down the road in the Sunday race. And then everyone else had basically the same problems as he had, except they were much, much slower. And as a result, didn't fall off trying to ride around those problems. And it was just a fairly average day. I mean, their issue is still this rear grip thing. And whenever you've got like air temperatures of 35 degrees and corresponding track temperatures that are through the roof on a circuit that was absolutely like disastrously filthy at the start of the weekend. It turns out I've got a friend who lives nearby, Red Bull rookie Carter Thompson. And Carter was saying that there's been these big storms recently that have just dumped sand over everything. And the track was just slippery and greasy and a bit unused. And they struggled with that. And then it got better as the weekend went on. But I think like Alex Rins' best lap of the race was only 0.3 slower than Marc Marquez's best lap of the race, but it was like his penultimate lap.
Yeah.
So basically their weekend peaked at the end of the weekend. And what's probably going to happen tomorrow in the test is that they're going to be like 1, 2, 3, 4, because there's going to be loads and loads of grip and everything's going to be lovely. But and they can go out at 9 a.m. or 5 p.m. and set lap times when it's cool. But it was kind of the Yamaha perfect storm of grip and comfort levels and Fabio hitting the place.
Yeah, I think the Quartararo thing is a big one. I think that's a really, really big part of it, because we tend to, judge the manufacturer by the best rider. But if the best rider has a lack of affinity for the track, then suddenly that sort of skews the whole picture. I mean, the other Yamahas were also like clearly worse than they were at Silverstone, but it wasn't like this night and day sort of situation. And they, it didn't sound like the rear grip thing was obviously a big part of it, and the temperatures, but it didn't sound like they really zeroed in on one problem. Like at one point, the electronics just didn't work with the soft tire. We're trying to chuck everybody off. At another point, they've mentioned so many issues during the weekend. Vibration out of nowhere that they've never had before.
The chatter thing. Yeah. Which you like, as Jack Miller pointed out, you only get chatter when you've got high grip. Yet somehow they discovered chatter with low grip, which is like, defying the laws of physics, basically.
Didn't help that Jack Miller annihilated Joan Mir on Saturday and ruined his own race too, in which he was probably quicker.
Mir was quite substantially of the belief that his race was ruined more. He was a little bit irate.
Sure.
Just a little bit irate.
I should say there's one. I can't believe this is happening, but there's one part of the weekend where I was like, "Ooh, Yamaha has impressed me a little bit," and it was Augusto Fernandez, who I thought was awesome.
I was going to say, this is obviously where this was going.
Augusto Fernandez was whatever he's running on the bike. Good.
See, that's the thing. That is the one positive for everyone in Yamaha from this weekend. It's that Augusto's got another new engine, and it might actually be pretty good. And it's that engine is like that will be the next two engines that they seal and homologate, like they can do because of the rules. And we not quite homologate, but you know what I mean, seal and use. And we're pretty sure that is 100% going to happen, because Augusto is not testing on Monday. He's preparing for his next test in Barcelona already. So he's already moving on to Barcelona.
Yeah.
Just something different, where actually Jack Miller is really looking forward to go. They're testing there as well. And Miller's really looking forward to testing there because he's hoping it'll solve some problems, because Barcelona, even worse than Aragon, which is dusty and dirty, they're expecting to find Barcelona basically glazed with Pirelli F1 rubber, which is notoriously low grip for MotoGP tires.
Yeah, because of the timing.
So they're really looking forward to going there and testing on that. But obviously what Augusto has got and what everyone else is going to get on Monday is better, really better. And I mean, that's huge news if it's a traction, drive, grip, rear tire related engine-y thing, technical term. It's it sounds really positive for them, actually.
One other quick Yamaha topic before we move on to another manufacturer that tumbled down the order. Mark Yu says, Rins was the top Yamaha. Is he getting better? My undetailed reply to this would be no. Val, you are around this podcast, you are ranking everyone for rider rankings. What was your take on Rins this weekend?
It's not okay, but like as a snapshot of getting better in one weekend is just, it's never enough. And it's a question of where you're judging him better relative to, for me. That's the big question. Honestly, the late race pace was quite impressive, but I think my big reservation with Rins remains that he can't qualify this Yamaha well without a tow. But again, this weekend it looked better relative to Quartararo, but Quartararo just doesn't like it here. So
the other thing worth noting is that not only does Fabio not like it here,
Rins
this
does.
is literally Rins's home circuit. To the extent that
true.
we stopped at Rins's fuel station this morning to fill the car. This is home, and there is a home race boost. That is a thing. That is the thing that happens.
So I wouldn't look too closely at this race outcome. It's just, again, his big issue is just exploiting the Yamaha on fresh rubber, which seems to be the big strength of this year's Yamaha. So there's an unpleasant mismatch going on there. Let's have a look further, but it was fine. He did all right. I don't think certainly this is not a weekend that adds to the Rins alarm.
No, I mean, in fairness, he is still 11th in the Grand Prix between Raul Fernandez and Enea Bastianini, who are not people we're talking positively about often this year, although better Fernandez weekend. You mentioned Jack Miller wiping out.
It really was. We're not going to mention it again this episode, so I'm going to mention it now. Good Raul Fernandez weekend.
We might a tiny
good
bit.
One.
There was a track house bit a bit later, so you get your chance.
Hey,
I'm also, while we're still on Yamaha, then before we do move on, I'm going to throw in that the good thing for Rins is that it is actually quite a few more championship points, because it now turns out that there might be a bit of a race between him and Miguel Oliveira to make sure that they're not the worst of the Yamahas going into the summer break if they want to keep their jobs.
That race is over. There's no chance that's being.
Yeah, I know, but every race towards it where he's pulling more points just unfortunately drives another nail into Miguel's coffin, doesn't it?
Yeah, this is the latest development around Toprak Razgatlioglu, who we discussed quite a bit in last week's podcast. It looks like the way he could be engineered into Yamaha, something we're more and more convinced is happening at Pramac, is through a bit of contract allowance that lets Yamaha ditch its worst rider.
I haven't even told you guys this yet, but I heard something else tonight that I'll fill you in on afterwards that makes me like, there's an announcement coming up, Mugello. I'm now pretty confident to say that. Probably the first time that I'm actually confident about it.
Listeners, put your fingers in your ears. As I was saying a minute ago, Joan Mir was wiped out by Jack Miller on Saturday, but Mir had a pretty decent Grand Prix by recent Mir standards. Johan Zarco, Honda's usual hero, had an atrocious weekend by his standards. Luca Marini obviously not here, injured at the moment. I mean, Yamaha had the really attention-grabbing drop because it had looked so good with Quartararo in dry conditions for a few races and then was nowhere here. Until Mir had that little Sunday flurry, Simon, this was looking pretty painful for Honda too, wasn't it? Like Zarco being so far off was totally against the run of form.
This is maybe controversial because I know not everyone shares this opinion, and maybe I don't think even Val necessarily always shares this opinion. But I think Joan Mir is Honda's Fabio Quartararo.
Oh, I wouldn't have phrased it like that.
He is the rider who is a step above all the rest. The problem is that he has a lot of characteristics and qualities and negatives that Fabio doesn't have.
Yeah.
Like a complete lack of patience that normally means he falls off trying to do a Fabio and be the best Honda. But he is the guy that he's a pretty competent package. And I think we've not really, or maybe we've forgotten that he's a really, really good Honda rider. And I think this was his weekend to kind of step up above everyone else on a weekend that was kind of bang average for Honda, but Mir was the guy who was at the front. And because of the way his race panned out this time, he didn't fall off. He gave an amazing description of what it's like to realize halfway through the race that you're not going to fall off. It was glorious. It is debrief. And basically it all clicked and it all came together for him.
To be fair, I think I've always said on this podcast, and it feels like I don't have that many original points to make, but this was always one. I think Joan Mir is, like, race pace wise, everything that Zarco's done still has not been enough to convince me that Joan Mir doesn't have more race pace. But Mir's just a poor qualifier, man. I mean, he's never really overcome that in his MotoGP career. Like, there's been ups and downs, but I think that's always been the two differences is Mir can't qualify particularly well and can't stay on the bike. And this weekend he did both okay. I mean, he didn't stay on the bike on Saturday, but it's not his fault at all. So.
But it wasn't his fault this time.
I'm just looking at the championship table because that is something that does matter in sport. And I can see Johan Zarco on 97 points and Joan Mir. I can't actually read that far down. So let's move on.
Worth noting that Zarco scored half of those points in 2 weekends, though. And one of them was like a bit weird. In fact, both of them were a bit weird, let's be honest.
Didn't see Mir capitalizing on that weirdness. Anyway.
The big thing about this weekend is that if any of y'all are like, why does Honda need Jorge Martin? You don't see it?
Yeah.
You don't see it now? Come on.
Yes. No.
Mr. Pole Position. Yeah.
I
know. I mean, that's also the exact same reason why Aprilia really need him too, though.
Yes.
As we're about to go on to, I'd imagine.
Yeah. Well, we'll have a quick detour via KTM first, because with all these manufacturers falling backwards, KTM leapt forwards. But it wasn't just like inheriting places. Pedro Acosta was very racy with Bagnaia for some of the weekend. So, KTM looking respectable again. Idirian in the Members Club said, is this race indicative of a slight gain in form for KTM, ignoring the fact that some riders failed to avoid ground, sky, ground incidents? And Jasper Pendlebury says, I'm watching on delay. I hope this doesn't age poorly. The KTMs look really quite good. Is it an upgrade bringing pace, a breakthrough understanding, or just circuit characteristics being well matched to KTM? Now, when I said that there'd be a KTM bit in the episode, Val basically went, don't ask me why KTM's good, because trying to figure out why KTM is good has been a mission since KTM came to MotoGP. Simon, why do you think KTM was good this weekend?
Oh, it's easy. I'll take that one, even if Val can't. It's because MotoGP and KTM are a complete enigma, and they turn up at some weekends and they're fast. And one of those weekends is always Aragon. They do this here. They just turn up and they're like quick at Aragon for reasons that we used to think it was because like Danny Pedrosa came here a lot to test. Remember, Jerez used to be the same. But it's not. It's just, there is just certain tracks. I mean, no, there is, actually, joking aside, there is one thing that does stand out. The KTM is pretty consistently, has taken over from Ducati quite quietly as being MotoGP's rocket ship. It is the fastest straight line bike in the grid. Yeah. And there's a massive back straight there. So that is an element of it. It's really, really quick in a straight line. There are no new upgrades. The only upgrade has been a slight one to the rider's mood, because between the last two races, they dragged them all to Mattighofen and said, look at all the shiny things we've bought for you. You can't have them yet, but we have bought them for you. So that has improved morale within the team. Heavy Poncharal is trying to sell his team, which has improved morale within Tech 3. And actually, I think everything was just one of those weekends where there was enough to make it work for them. But then they all got into the race, got a bit of altitude sickness being so far up the grid, and fell off as a result. So
Most of them,
I think
anyway.
that came off as, man, Tech 3 will be glad to be done with Hervé Poncharal, which I don't think is what you were trying.
No. I think Hervé Poncharal might be quite glad to be done with KTM, was kind of the vibe I got from him whenever we sat down this morning for a chat.
If you want to
thankfully, that's coming later this week to the Race YouTube channel. So
we will dig into Tech 3 KTM and a few kind of F1 adjacent things in that video later this week. And you can see the whole interview with Hervé Poncharal, who went on for a long time with you, Simon. If you've seen his TV interviews this weekend, they were pretty brief compared to his chat with you. So you'll get all of that. Actually, on
that
Patreon.
Was not too bad. I think I got 4 questions in 9 minutes. My record with Hervé is once asking 3 questions in a 50-minute podcast. 5-0.
So I wanna. This is a task to the list or whoever's like listens religiously to us talk through like episodes to episodes. If there is anybody in the world, if there isn't, I totally understand. But if there is, you will hear Hervé Poncharal reference a Winston Churchill quote that also came up in like TV broadcast interviews multiple times. Can you help me with this? I don't think that quote exists. I think he might have made it up. Can you help me track down the origin of that quote, please? I think it's like to govern is to foresee or something like that.
Yeah.
And I could not corroborate it as being from any historical figure that I'm aware of.
Should we mention the section in our office group chat this
No.
weekend where we modified actual Winston Churchill?
No. We should not.
No. Definitely not. We mentioned Jorge Martin and Aprilia wanting Martin and all of that stuff. We're not going to get deeply into the Martin thing this week because I think we're going to have a lot of chances to in the coming weeks. But a little bit of other kind of rider machinations going on at Aprilia. They're testing someone at Trackhouse who's coming as a bit of a surprise. Val, you have said many times, and I agree with you, that MotoGP teams need to test new riders, need to actually try out Moto2 people. That's what they're doing.
Yeah, no, look, it's you have to use that opportunity because we've talked to MotoGP team bosses about it. I think maybe this specific team boss, David Abrivio, Trackhouse, and he just said that you can't fit it into the in-season schedule the way it is right now, especially for a satellite team which does not get its own testing, which gets manufacturer testing. So they don't feel like they can sacrifice a day of in-season testing to field somebody, whether that's correct or not. I mean, I think it probably is just about correct because I don't think one day can tell you everything you want to know about a rookie rider, but still ideally it's just so important to have just a prior baseline understanding of how the guy's going to look on your bike, because it feels like every time it's a bit of a Pandora's box. Every time you don't know whether there's a hard cap on the ceiling or whether maybe they're going to hit the ground running straight away. And obviously, it's then going to evolve over rounds. But the early impression, I think, is important. And ideally, you would have more than Moto3 and Moto2 races to make that impression. So, Trackhouse, Ayagura is still injured. He's had to withdraw from the weekend on medical advice, even though he planned to race. I don't actually. This interesting one. I think we thought that was in breach of regulations, weren't we? Because he was unfit.
We kind of thought he was. He was declared unfit. It's been more than 10 days.
Yeah.
And then it all just kind of, no one raised the point, really.
Yeah.
And I might go and try and talk to Trackhouse on Monday and kind of see what happened with that. But yeah, a bit of an odd one.
Yeah. For what it's worth, I don't think they were trying to pull a fast one, and I think they legitimately expected I to be back.
Unless he did actually come to the circuit and because he was at the circuit.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe he actually came to the circuit and got declared fit, which is not the hardest thing to do in MotoGP.
And then got declared unfit.
Then just said, actually, my doctor's advised me not to ride. I'm going home, which would legally clear them as per the rules.
Yeah, it's a complicated one. I don't think
tend to fall out of the medical center like trip going out the door. Oh no, my leg, which Cal Crutchlow once did.
Yes, I just think Anyway, Val, we haven't even said who Trackhouse is testing yet.
Anyway, Ayagura was unfit to participate, so a bike is went free through the weekend, but it's going free on Monday, and Trackhouse has decided to use that bike to test joint Moto2 championship leader Manu Gonzalez, who's actually had one of his rougher Moto2 weekends of the season, but on the whole, taken holistically, I think has been the quickest guy in Moto2 this season. Simon seems to disagree with me. That surprises me. He is wrong if he disagrees with me.
No, I don't disagree with you. He's just not the most exciting
No,
person I would have put in the bike. That's more what it is. And I actually think they had another choice who they weren't allowed to run, from what I understand.
Oh, contractually with the
contractually because of his Moto2 contract. I think Diogo Moreira was the first choice, but Moto2 contractually with Trans wasn't allowed to. Which is like peak Livio Suppo, who runs that team now. That's peak Livio being like, no, he might hurt himself.
Curious, but I think ultimately Gonzalez has generally earned it on the whole of this season.
Yeah.
I think he's been in most conventional weekends, there's been a bit of a step between him and many of the other ones. It's his fourth, I think, season in Moto2. He's not a no-brainer MotoGP prospect, but he deserves a go. Whenever you're in contention for a Moto2 title, it's really hard to begrudge a MotoGP test. I don't know how much one day, especially one day where I imagine the instruction is, don't you dare crash this bike. Don't you dare. We'll tell him.
You say that, but the last time we saw someone get a similar chance, it did kind of immediately fast track them into MotoGP. And it was Johan Zarco and a Suzuki.
Suzuki, yeah. Wow, it's that long ago. 9 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that Suzuki signed him.
No, because Tech 3 were immediately like, we need this guy. And he ended up on a much better bike. He ended up in a Yamaha.
I always thought it was Suzuki thinking about it and then favoring Alex Rins over.
I thought he'd been snapped up by Yamaha first in the end.
Curious,
but either way, he was in MotoGP within 6 months.
Yeah.
So,
and this does come at a time.
It bodes kind of well for his. I mean, it's just one day less, isn't it? It's one day of testing, kind of not wasted for someone at some point in the future when they sign him.
And he's doing it with a team that is part of an organization that has at least one vacancy, probably, maybe more than that. Jorge Martin, Aprilia, from what we understand, is trying its best to keep Martin on side in case that can be repaired somehow. At the same time, Raul Fernandez is, it's all right this weekend, but it's my description of this season.
They are making strong noises that they are going to honor his 2-year contract, and that they still don't see it as a failed project, which I can only presume means that Davide Brivio is in fact the genius that I'm not, and that he does still see more. Which I'm not being flippant when I say that. Like, he's Davide Brivio.
Yeah.
He's really good at this. So obviously he sees something. He has to. There has to be some potential within Raul Fernandez that they see that we don't, because there's still so much faith in him.
I think he was proper good this weekend. I mean, I brought it up earlier. I think he was.
Relative to the other Aprilias, he was.
But I'm grading on a curve. That's a problem.
Also, we're talking about the other Aprilias. We might have forgotten that Marco Bezzecchi won the last Grand Prix, and that was bad this weekend. Race pace good, but race pace when you're coming from the back of the grid because you shunted and your bike's broken, and that was a come down. We should, however, talk about the person who won this Grand Prix, because we kind of haven't yet. So Marc Marquez dominated. We're nearly at the end of the episode. We should mention Marc Marquez, not because he begrudges success, but we're getting kind of used to it. Although this was his first Grand Prix win in nearly 2 months, which is a very strange stat. And because he wins a sprint every week, I kind of forgot that.
His first European win of the year.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
What? Yeah, I know.
Yeah. That's mad. So a variety of Members Club questions on the subject of Mark's win, kind of tangentially. I want very quick answers to all of these. You can both answer the first one. Angelina says, at what race will Mark celebrate winning the championship?
Before we go to Asia.
So something mid-September, kind of Misano kind of time. Val?
Don't remember when we were going to Asia, but I would say with 2 rounds to spare.
Oh,
certainly.
Well, it's because it's like there's a lot of points per grabs in one round. It's 37.
He has a lot of points too, though.
Well, he's got 32 in hand. He needs to have 74 in hand to be champion with 2 in advance. I think that's reasonable.
I think that math relies on quite a few crashes out of race leading positions to make it last that long. I'm going to go in the middle and say Phillip Island in October. Motorsport Mike, so I'm going to throw this one to both of you as well. Motorsport Mike says, how do you rate Mark and Alex's dance moves? Did you enjoy the celebration?
I did.
It felt slightly less forced than some of the theatrics we've seen. I've never forgiven Marc Marquez for that ridiculous Aragon Championship winning celebration. Do you remember the elaborate? Was it Aragon one that was like the 10-pin bowling?
Yes, I was going to say, was it the weird
yeah.
one with the balls that made no sense?
Yeah, and it was just
so
So compared to
contrived.
that, I mean, everything is good. And also, actually, fair play. They do get a little bit of brownie points for celebrating by cracking open beers, even though they were 0-0 beers. You know, like that's I like that.
I thought it was really nice. I don't particularly love the song necessarily, but there's a certain sort of football's co-opted it in kind of a cool way, and this really felt like a promoted team celebrating or anything like that. There's a real like something genuine about it that is often missing from coordinated stuff.
Definitely. I kind of quite like this because we're middle of the season. There's no title won. The novelty of Mark winning again has worn off by now. But actually, it's kind of like a little lifetime achievement award celebration at a home race, grandstand with his own fan club people there, and for the two brothers who just notched up another 1-2 to kind of come and celebrate with them with some weird dancing. I was like, oh yeah, you're allowed that, Mark. You've been through a lot the last few years. Alex, you've trundled your way upwards and worked really hard at it, and you're having a great season. Have your moment, do your dance. Love it. It's fine. It's harmless. It was fun. Stuart Edwards asks one just for Val. What will Val's justification be for Marc Marquez not being number one in rider rankings?
Well, he's number one. Spoilers. Topped every session. Come on. He topped every session, probably had like a good couple of tenths per lap in the pocket too. It's clearly
yeah. Well, there you go.
It was the best rider in MotoGP.
Like the first race in ages where I've seen someone be like, I always say that Rossi's best win was the Phillip Island 2003, where he got the 10-second penalty and just won by 11 seconds. Mark could have done that this weekend.
Yeah,
he could have just found more.
The margin from Friday morning onwards was just playing with everyone basically.
That was very funny. The Friday morning thing was very, very funny. Like he was a second clear. I've looked into it. He stopped 6 of the 8 FP1s this season, and that kind of undersells it how dominant he always feels Friday morning on a fresh track. Like there's never a problem of finding pace for Mark. Never ever once this season. The only problem is like staying on the bike and reacting to like complications. When he needs more tenths, the risk level varies, but the tenths are there. They're there. You can get them.
If you want to ask Val other questions about all the positions you do disagree with in his rider rankings when they're published, you can, if you're in the Race Members Club on Patreon, chuck your questions at him for what I call Val's Tangents, which is his post-race video where he debates all your points and questions. Also on Patreon later this week, our next 2015 episode, we're off to Brno. Nice little preview, actually going back there in 2025 as well. Final question for this episode, and Simon, this might allow you to have the rant that you promised pre-episode you wanted to have. Mike Falcone says, am I the only one that thought the senior TT was more exciting than this? Listeners, if you haven't followed the TT, the senior TT did not actually happen because of poor weather. Before Simon says what he fancies saying, I think the senior TT build-up was kind of more tense than this because that kind of will they race, won't they race, the strong winds and stuff. That was quite a nice sporting story after all that. Well, not a nice one. It had a sad end, but it had some tension to it. Whereas as soon as Mark was in the lead, this one didn't really. But Simon, what did you enjoy more? The senior TT not happening or this?
I mean, we didn't know on Friday morning whether or not we were going to have a senior TT, but we knew on Friday morning who was going to win at Aragon. So, like, at least there was an element of drama in it not happening. So anyone who has been and done TT will tell you that TT hangover is a real thing, where you just suddenly find yourself back at work on Monday morning and life is dull because there's not motorbikes skimming past you at 200 miles an hour. Or you're not on one of the motorbikes at 200 miles an hour in some cases. And I got to Aragon on Thursday morning and it was like, oh, MotoGP. And it felt kind of flat all weekend, made worse by the fact that the race was just awful. And as I said to you guys before we started recording, whenever I initially asked Matt for a space in the podcast to rant about this, I got back to the hotel to do this on we're now like, it was like 7 p.m. on Sunday night. And it felt like getting back to the hotel on Saturday night and Friday night and Thursday night, because MotoGP has just become this massive conveyor belt of turn up, qualify, sprint, race, go home, turn up, qualify, sprint, race, test, on and on and on and on. And I don't want to sound like I'm moaning, because I am moaning, but I'm not moaning because I'm sick and tired of travel or anything like that. I'm moaning because I love our sport and none of it feels special anymore. It just feels like a churn going through these 22 races this season. Like I credit to anyone who listens to the podcast every week and who watches 22 races a season, because if I wasn't here working, if this wasn't my job, I would not find the time to watch 44 MotoGP races, 88 Grand Prix races a year. It's a massive commitment. It's a massive drain. And it's just, it's relentless. And there's no, I don't know, I'm not in love with MotoGP at the minute, because I'm finding it very hard to find anything special. And it is probably because I've got a TT hangover, and it's probably because Mark is so dominant in general at the minute, and this weekend in particular, which isn't helping. But it's lost a bit of magic recently.
And this kind of the sheer volume of races, I feel like, is probably the kind of the
more than
biggest
anything,
contributing
it's that.
factor. Yeah. I think when you're not, you say you're not jaded by traveling, and I'm happy to go with that. Also, when you are traveling around the world to do this, and like you said at the start of this recording to me, you've been in the paddock for 21 consecutive days right now. You are going to be more knackered than someone who's enjoying it from a distance. And I had to say that this year, it was interesting how quickly we were able to start recording this podcast after Aragon, because it was quite a, we were short of storylines in a way. We had plenty to talk about in the podcast, but there wasn't a lot of quick go and chase this around the paddock. I don't mind. Part of me doesn't mind the big calendar from my job at the race and rotoring everybody across massive F1 and MotoGP calendars. Whoa, yeah, the spreadsheet's complicated for the year. As a fan, my daughter is just massively getting into racing this year. She's about to turn 6, and she'll be very happy with a WCR and an F1 Academy and a MotoGP and a Formula E race every weekend, because those are the things we're following as a family. And she, if it's not in a race, the gaps in the women's series calendars are huge, and it'd be lovely if there's a bit more of that.
Tell her I was talking to Beatrice Nalla today. Beatrice was here today. Women's World Championship front runner.
That will absolutely make my daughter's day, because Beatrice Naylor is her favourite rider. But yeah, as a fan, seeing it through my daughter's eyes as she gets into motorsport, it's the first time I've thought, I want more and more racing all the time for a while, because this is also my job. But last year, and actually to an extent 2023, when Martin and Pecco were kind of at each other so much and the twists kept coming, I kind of didn't mind how long the season was getting, because there was something new. Even if it's the same protagonist, the storyline kept tweaking and changing. A 20 billion race calendar with Marc Marquez being the overwhelming favourite to win every race is a big problem for MotoGP, and it is going to be very, very hard to sustain interest in that. Val, have you got any disagreement with us on this?
No, but there's a part of me that, especially for like doing rankings and stuff and just formulating how I feel about certain riders and certain decisions, etc. All of these races, and the fact that MotoGP does a very good job putting on sessions that matter, rather than awful nonsense practice that I hate and I feel like is wasting my lifespan, like my limited lifespan as a human being on Earth. God, I hate practice.
Should feel really seen right now.
No, genuinely, because we also work F1 shifts, don't we, Matt? And I've definitely messaged you at least once, like 30 minutes into an F1 FP1 session, being like, I feel myself dying watching this. It was like, genuinely, I've never felt worse watching a sporting event, apart from like when something really bad happened, watching one of those FP1 sessions. MotoGP does a really, really good job limiting just total crap track action, just awful. What was the point I was going to make? God, I hate practice. Anyway, but I think apart from like the oversaturation and the fact that it does genuinely feel like a little too much for me, it's also 22 races feels 44 races, 22 rounds feels like too much for one championship. I don't know how to fix this, but it doesn't feel right to me that we're going to have one championship title at the end of this. I really love sometimes with those like 8, 9, 10 race seasons that happen sometimes for some reason, because the stakes, artificially maybe, but they are inflated. Something, it's like every race really feels tense, even when it's a boring race.
What I said about like a lack of feeling special this year.
Yeah.
It just feels like we're on a conveyor belt of races, and there's no time to put any pomp around a race. There's no time to build the fact that we're going to Mugello next. Like, it should be awesome because it's Mugello, and it's like Mugello is the next race, and it is immediately followed by another race. And actually, the other race that immediately follows it is also one of the greatest races in the world. And there's going to be even less time to hype Assen because we're coming straight from,
I feel sorry for Mark because either he's going to win just the one championship after 22 rounds of this, or he's going to break a collarbone or something and lose this championship after all this. And like that second outcome is unconscionable, just ridiculous. But it just feels like there's so much grind for all of these guys to, like, some of them are running 10th all season. And it just, for 44 races, it feels, again, I'd rather have the race on Sunday than not. I'm not saying that. I genuinely, even a race like this, there's something to dig into. But
you've hit the nail on the head with something else that I hadn't realized I was thinking until you've just said it, Val. But it's also that this isn't F1. And F1 is a 24 race calendar.
Yeah.
And you can be average and mid-pack, and that's okay. But this is MotoGP where things are different and the physics of life are different. And you can get taken out by someone else's crash and have a really serious injury as a result of it because you're exposed and it's MotoGP. And then suddenly, because of the churn of races that you miss in a short period of time, congratulations, you've Miguel Oliveira, you've lost your livelihood. That's the other thing. Everyone is being punished so much right now for the not even a mistake in some cases, just for existing in a space at a certain time. That also, I think, contributes to that. Like, I don't like that Miguel is essentially going to end up losing his job because Luca Marini crashed into him. For me, alligator. Sorry, Luca. Sorry. Yeah. No, I think he's previously been crashed into by Luca. I mean, he's previously been crashed into by everyone in the grid.
Yeah, exactly.
But but I think that's an element of it too. It's that, that adds to my sense of this kind of conveyor belt churn that we're on.
Good news is tomorrow you're back in the paddock for a test. Sorry about that.
Do you know what? No, genuinely. And I never thought, I have never, ever, this is a brand new sentence that no one has ever said before, especially me. Thank God for Moto2 and David Munoz. Because they saved Sunday.
At some point, when this calendar has a gap, we will get you two talking Moto2, Moto3 for a member special again, because I know you're keen. It's just there haven't been enough hours in a day not at racetracks for a while. On that slightly down note, but a down note that comes to the place of actually we all love MotoGP and want it to feel special, and it's not Mark's fault he's dominating.
I hope. Do you know what? I hope we get a load of comments on this and people telling us that we're crazy and that they're sitting at home on the sofa and it does feel special still. Like, I genuinely hope I'm wrong in this. I hope that this is just me being more tired than I think I am or whatever.
Let us know. We'll be back, me and Simon, probably just us next week, because Val is off to Le Mans 24 hours, which sounds like a very, very long race for my taste, but I'm sure he'll have a great time.
There's some washed up old motorbike racer doing that. You should keep an eye out for him.
Yeah, was he like some friend of Marc Marquez? Can't remember. Keep an ear out for another TT special as well, in which Simon and Megan and the race's founder, Andrew Van Berg, who had his first visit to the TT this weekend, chat about their experience. More TT video, more MotoGP video as well. Hervé Poncharal exclusives in that. Plenty to come. Please watch and listen to it, even though we're just a MotoGP is not very fun at the moment.